What is the stupidest thing that ever came out of your mouth? When I was doing a woman's taxes and asked her if she had any medical expenses for the year, she said, "Well, I had to put my husband in a nursing home last year." I said, "That's excellent, big time deductions there." Then I looked up and saw the look on her face, and it still took me another 3 or 4 seconds to realize why she looked so horrified. I've never apologized so sincerely and completely in my life. I had a really hard time forgiving myself for that one. I got off a red eye, very sleep deprived, and realized I forgot my glasses on the plane. I asked the very kind gate agent if she could go check my seat to see if she could find them. While she was gone, I touched my face and felt my glasses. I was mortified and apologized profusely when she returned. She was really nice about it though. I was giving a presentation about my club in high school, and at the end I wanted to invite people to come visit us. So I went to say stop by or say hi, but instead I managed to tell about 100 high schoolers to stay hi. Didn't know why everyone laughed till my friend told me what I said later. While out for a walk I admired a cute dog. I wanted to ask what breed it was, but my brain wasn't working. Instead I asked, "What brand is your dog?" Which startled the owner and myself. My attempt at correcting myself resulted in me blurting out species, which only made matters worse. My parents didn't want to shout our names for dinner or to come downstairs, so my dad installed a literal doorbell in our bedrooms. So if we were needed in the kitchen, we were summoned by the child bell. We lived in a 2-bed semi-edit. My dad passed when I was younger, so thank you for the love of his unique idea. A couple. When I was a kid, my dad would take me to the 7-Eleven for Slurpees. I adored it, because I loved Slurpees. The only rule was I couldn't tell my mom I got it or went anywhere. I didn't realize until I was about 12 or so that all the times he took me out for Slurpees was really just him getting liquor and feeding his alcoholism, and that's why I wasn't allowed to say anything. My mom also slept with me well into my teen years. It wasn't until I got into late middle school that I mentioned it to her, and my friends thought it was extremely weird. My dad told me it was because my mom was a control freak, and that I was putting a wedge in their marriage by letting her sleep with me. So I finally demanded she stop. I later found out she slept with me for that long because my dad was a raging junkie, alcoholic, and could do some really terrible things while high. I knew my dad was an addict, but I never knew my dad could do anything like that. I take care of my mom now. He died about 6 years ago and I've never seen her happier. Edit. For those wondering, I am a daughter. I always wanted candy from the grocery store. When we were checking out, my mom told me it was illegal for the cashier to sell children candy if it wasn't their birthday. I was in 3rd grade before I realized it was untrue. When I was 8, our teacher made up a whole story about how he was dating a mermaid. He showed letters and trinkets and everybody in class believed him. I have to add, we lived in a small town close to the North Sea, and there is a lot of merman folklore in that part of the Netherlands. We must have told our parents, but everybody kept it up. The teacher managed to stick to the story pretty much the whole school year. Can't really remember how he told us that it was just a story, but to this day I feel that it was such a weird thing to do. I thought that it was normal to expect to be physically harmed when someone was mad at you, until I was a teen. My mom would beat me when she got mad, which was pretty often. Also, I thought that mistakes were unacceptable, because I'd be beaten for even the smallest of mistakes. It's a little thing, but it was very surprising to me that it was my dad and not my mom who stayed home with me when I was sick. Also, my friends all had stories of their parents trying to get them to go to school even when they were sick. My parents never did that, and even let me stay home a few times even when they knew I was faking it. I know it's hard for a lot of working parents to stay home with a sick kid, but all my friends at the time were pretty much from the same middle-class background as I was, and my father was a hospital physician and the head of his division at the hospital and also saw a lot of patients, so it was not easy for him to miss work. I guess he handled a lot of stuff by phone. This was before the internet. It's a little thing, but it really made me feel so cared for, and I still associate staying home sick with getting taken care of by my dad, who had an excellent bedside manner. Edit. I just want to add that I found, later, that my father had kept charts for all my childhood illnesses, tracking fever, symptoms, medications and dosages, etc., including the fake ones. Saving food containers, whether it was plastic sour cream containers, or styrofoam Big Mac boxes. Even things like soup cans would get saved to serve as makeshift cups. I don't think I drank out of an actual normal drinking glass, except at restaurants, until I was in my teens. Random kids living at our house. I had 9 siblings and my parents always had 1 or 2 other kids that had been kicked out of their homes living with us, usually friends of my older brothers and sisters. It wasn't until my 20s that I discovered that most had been disowned by their parents for being gay. Also had no clue that this wasn't normal for the 60s. I never had a curfew, so I would stay out much longer than my friends could. I also could stay up as long as I wanted. Most would think this was awesome. It was part of the iceberg on my parents not showing me they loved me or paying me any attention. Eating walnut makes your mouth burn. Every time I eat anything with walnut, was burning my palate, gums and tongue for a while after. It was like that from day one of my life, and I thought it's normal. You eat cake, your mouth burn. It's a package deal. Never questioned or mentioned that to anyone. I just assumed that's normal. I was in mid-30s and my brother mentioned that he had allergic reaction to walnut, and that his mouth were burning, so he had to go to Dr. ASAP. It took me 30+ years to find out that I have walnut allergy to some degree. I still eat it. I used to come home from school and just strip off completely nude, and stay like that for the rest of the day. It lasted until I was at least 16. I didn't stay shut in my bedroom either. Used to just stroll about the house hanging brain for all to see. Having a mom who would be admitted to the mental hospital a few times, having to have time split between grandparents because mom was mentally unstable and dad worked and I couldn't be left at his parents' house when he wasn't home. Later learned that was because my uncle had been accused of child molestation. Have a grandfather that was terrifying and enjoyed terrorizing me. Having a mother that I knew loved me but was emotionally distant yet coddled my older middle brother. I was in a group therapy session talking about our childhoods and I was like, I had a normal happy childhood, and then people started describing stuff and I was like, oh ... that reminds me of this ... and then I realized ... oh, guess it wasn't so normal. My Christian family used to celebrate Passover, as in, glass of wine out for Elijah, youngest kid asking ritual questions, ceremonial plates, the whole Seder package. Sometimes we did this as guests at a Jewish friend's house, but at least once, my very Methodist mother cooked a full authentic Seder menu in our house. I knew not everyone did this, but all my Jewish friends at school did, so I didn't think much of it. Then I transferred to a Catholic school and was shocked that most kids knew nothing at all about Judaism. The cute twist is that my parents had met at a Seder when they lived in NYC in the 1980s. One of Dad's law school friends was roommates with a co-worker of Mom's. The roommates co-hosted a Seder and decided to invite their Gentile friends to make it a bigger party. The more the merrier, and so a Methodist and a Catholic sat together, got to talking, swapped numbers, went on a date, went on more dates, got married, and produced 2 kids. They had us celebrate Passover because it was a part of their story, and our origin stories. Honestly, it was just got a disinclination and abusive everything was, having my entire paycheck from my first job be taken for bills and maybe getting a dinner or at the Chinese food restaurant as payment, being the only girl being responsible for vitamins and babysitting everything, being forced to be the adult as a child but not given any respect, the weirdest, babysitting every single weekend. Many times both my siblings and the children of my parents' friends, so they could go get drunk at a swingers club, being told things that happened at the swingers club that a preteen should never know about her parents. My group of friends and I convinced ourselves we were actually possessed by demons and lived like that for months. It wasn't the playing light as a feather stiff as a board as sleepovers witchcraft phase that most girls have. It's like we made our own little cult. When we got together the Ouija board came out and we spoke to Satan in tongues and got half naked. We told each other about prophetic visions our demons told us about people we didn't like dying. None of them did. We didn't sacrifice animals but we would find already dead ones, lizards and birds mostly, and do ceremonies around it before burning it. We weren't goth kids either. We dressed and acted normal most of the time. We just had this fucked up little secret imaginary satanic thing going on. I think it's because our environment was unbearably evangelical Christian and we needed to act out some way. I assumed others did weird things like that. But I think our group went a bit too far. It was my dad being grump and yelling at my mom all the time. Really, it was them bickering constantly. Oh, also pinching each other on the butt randomly. Having an incest pedo grandpa who not only assaulted his daughter but also his great-granddaughters and paid 2 other members of the family by marriage for sex, and was never confronted in any way, shape or form. It was just weird how everyone in the family acted like he was a good man and still treated him with respect and spoke highly of him and even defended what he did by never telling authorities. Thankfully he's dead and the death wasn't too peaceful. Everyone in my family is very petty and emotionally immature. No one apologizes or talks about how they feel. Things you said a month ago can come back up anytime. Unsurprisingly, I get super freaked out when people raise their voice at me, even if it's to agree, and I apologize constantly. Saving food containers, whether it was plastic sour cream containers, or styrofoam Big Mac boxes, even things like soup cans would get saved to serve as makeshift cups. I don't think I drank out of an actual normal drinking glass, except at restaurants, until I was in my teens. My mom is a forensic pathologist, so about 75% of our dinner conversations would be considered weird, creepy by most people. I remember going to a dinner at a coworker's house and she mentioned what my mom did for a living to her parents, coworker's mom, but you don't talk about it very often, right? That would be unsettling. Me, laughing nervously, no, not at all. Anyway, that was really the first time I realized how weird our average dinner conversations were to people not in our family. Being fired for screaming at my boss, growing up, the way my father dealt with frustration or anger, was to scream at the top of his lungs and get in our faces. I was usually the main target being the youngest boy, so I learned that that's the appropriate way to handle your emotions. After being fired I decided to go to therapy. My mom and her GF would make my sister and I regularly pee in a cup. I was about 13, she was around 11, and tell us it's to make sure we weren't doing drugs. Very strict household. 10 years later my mom's GF got pretty drunk and finally confessed to us they were both using our urine to pass their own drugs tests. I used to sleep with my dad up until middle school. People thought it was weird, and I would still hold his hand in high school. And then a teacher made fun of me, but that was also the same year my dad died, so I'm glad I got to have that extra time and connection with him. My mother would only let us use the shower in the basement. It wasn't very nice and was always cold down there. The main bathroom wasn't to be used for showering, so we wouldn't mess it up. It also had a cloth shower curtain that was just for show, so you couldn't really try to use it without getting water everywhere anyway. We also had a living room that was for show only and not to be used. Overall, the house I grew up in was just really uncomfortable. In England, my uncle's neighbor had a pet monkey, huge cage in their back garden with some sort of macaque that lived there. They had it for years. It was totally normal to me, and it wasn't until a long time after that I realized a family neighbor owning a monkey is definitely not normal. They're still very close family friends, but I personally see them very rarely. I really ought to ask what the hell went on for that to happen. It was in Rotherham, Yorkshire, if anyone's interested. I grew up in an evangelical Christian household. We went to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday evening. During the Sunday morning service, the pastor would excite the crowd with music and yelling and would encourage everyone to speak in tongues, technically known as glossolalia. For those of you who are not familiar with this practice, it involves a person utter words or speech-like sounds that are unrecognizable to everyone, including the speaker. The reason this is done is because one is so filled with the Holy Spirit that he is speaking through you and mortals cannot understand his language. At least that is what I was told by my parents. This started when I was around 5 years old. We would be in a crowded church building of several hundred people. The music would be blaring, the pastor would be yelling into the microphone and then start babbling incoherently. Then people around me would join in. Then my parents would start. After several episodes of this, my parents would encourage me to let the Holy Spirit speak through me, so eventually I would start babbling randomly. My parents would be so proud of me. Then we'd go get lunch and continue our day until Sunday evening service, where this might happen again. At the time this seemed normal because my parents only hung out with evangelical Christians, including my cousins, who went to the same church. I pretty much never really thought much about this until as an adult I watched the documentary Jesus Camp. By the way, I'm no longer religious, and they showed young kids crying and speaking in tongues that had hit me. These poor kids were being psychologically abused. It is not a normal way to teach Jesus' love in this fashion to young, impressionable children. Meet up with an older friend, go somewhere outside hidden, get naked, then get dressed and play stuff together. I don't even know how it started or why. We are both guys. Don't think he touched me. It's just so weird to remember this with no context, lol. My dad's low-key alcoholism meant that he was always drinking something alcoholic, from the bourbon in his coffee in the morning until falling asleep drunk in an easy chair at night. I never saw him driving without a beer or a soda pop-sized bottle of wine tucked between his legs, not even once. My sister used to be super competitive about how fast she could put her makeup on. I remember thinking it was normal since girls' makeup, boys' video games was the big mentality in the early 2000s. It got to a point where my mom banned makeup because one of my younger sisters made a huge mess with it in the kitchen on her expensive kitchen table. I was student teaching and discussing my weekend plans to visit my cousin. One teacher said, "Oh, you're visiting your cousin? I thought you said you were going to visit your boyfriend." In an attempt to gloss over his mistake and communicate the sentiment of no worries, I instead shrugged and for some reason said same thing. I was a cashier about a year ago and I had to unlock the bathroom for people when they needed to go. So anyways, I unlocked the bathroom for this guy and he says thanks and I replied have a good one. That's what I always said when people left, after they bought something, not when they're going to shit. I hated that job. I was like 18 or 19 and still thought the term rabbit dog was rabbit dog, and I said that out loud in a car with my friends. I still remember the exact location we were driving by when it came out of my mouth because I felt so stupid.